changed me as a reader. Today, as you can tell by the title, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be telling you the first book I read versus my favorite book read by an author, but horror edition. So I'm jumping on the trend and let's just get straight into it, I guess. So starting off with Kingfisher. So Kingfisher is kind of a good author to begin with if you're new to horror. She writes really gothic, spooky sort of books. They're not too long. And yeah, I mean, she really does fantasy so well. And her horror is no different. They are incredible, just like her fantasy books. But the first Kingfisher that I ever read, The Hollow Places. So The Hollow Places is like this terrifying folk story. We're following our main character. I think her name's Kara. Yeah, Kara, who finds a mysterious bunker in a hole in the wall in her uncle's house. So she discovers like there's weird, creepy creatures in here. It's very haunting. It has that very deep gothic vibe, as you can tell by the cover. Stunning. The creatures that she finds in the hole in the wall in her uncle's house, they seem to feed on the fear, and so the dread and the tension that builds in the Hollow Places was just incredible. And it is kind of a chunkier read, but honestly it is such a page turner and it is so good. But that's not my favorite from the author. My favorite from Kingfisher is What Moves the Dead. If you know me, you know that I am obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe, and What Moves the Dead is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher. This is so creepy. Think fungus turning people crazy. Again, the cover, I mean, these covers are incredible. This is a first in like a series that she's doing. They're really short novellas, but they are so intense. They're so dark. They are creepy. I mean, the fungus descriptions in here, the descent into madness. So if you really love The Fall of the House of Usher, but you're like wondering what actually happens after, or you just want more context to that story, What Moves the Dead really delivers on that. I felt myself getting answers to questions that I had from that story. She created a well-rounded story based off of Edgar Allan Poe's short story. So yeah, I highly recommend picking up What Moves the Dead. It's so incredible. Loved everything about this book. The second in the series is great too. And I'm looking forward to the third one that comes out very soon. So that is Kingfisher. Next up, we have one of my favorite authors, and that's C.J. Cooke. So C.J. Cooke writes these haunting gothic stories. The first one that I read from C.J. Cooke was The Lighthouse Witches. I was interested in reading about witches and delving deeper into that lore, and I fell in love. Like, her writing style is just me in a nutshell. It is lyrical, it's to the point, it's just so well-rounded, and I love that stuff. So that is the first book that I read from C.J. Cooke, and essentially it is following like a family of witches, and there's a mystery. One of them goes missing, and it's set on an island in Scotland. It's beautiful, the setting, the descriptions of it, so incredible. It's not really a horror story as such. In essence, it is very horrific because it's about people who go missing, and the tension that builds is so intense. But some people wouldn't say that it's horror. I think there's a fine line between the descriptions of what horror is and what horror isn't. But I think that should be another video in itself. That's not for me to discuss now. But my favorite from C.J. Cooke is The Nesting. I love polar horror. Anything that is wintry, anything that has an icy undertone, I'm all for it. The Nesting was incredible. It's following a young woman who overhears something on her journey. She's struggling in life, and she realizes that there's an opportunity here. She becomes a nanny to a family who have just lost their mother, and they are rebuilding a house in Norway. And so she signs up for this job, goes off to Norway to look after the two kids while the house is kind of being built and they're just rebuilding their life in Norway. We're set in the forest. There's an undertone of like gothic. There's something eerie in the woods and something wrong in this home. So just think like nature's revenge. It's so incredible. The whole mystery element in here is just so good. I feel like CJ Cooke does mysteries so well. Another one of her incredible books is A Haunting in the Arctic. The plot twist, oh my god, it was so shocking, and I feel like she writes those so well. My favorite book by CJ Cooke, 5 stars. I think she's only got 5 and 4s from me, so she is one of my favorite authors. Next we have Tori Bovalino, and I've met Tori at an event, and she is such a lovely woman. I love her stories. I've read everything that she's written. And the first one was The Devil Meets Three. This is a demonic academic story. It's set in a library and they find a haunted ancient book and things just don't work out for them. And I feel like this has a perfect blend of like the supernatural with the contemporary kind of gothic influence. I really loved it. It was my first book from her and I knew that her writing was going to be something that I could eat up. My favorite, could you guess? If you've watched my other videos, you probably know that I'm going to mention this book, and it's My Throat an Open Grave. My favorite book from 2024. It's a recommendation that I always give to people. If you're new to horror, pick this up. If you like fairy tales, pick this up. If you like short horror, pick this up. Honestly, there are so many reasons to pick up My Throat an Open Grave, and like, yeah, it's just perfect to me. So My Throat an Open Grave is about a young woman who is from a really small town, and this small town has a ton of superstition. There's a lore where you don't go into the forest because there is the Lord of the Wood in the forest who steals babies. So this little town is like God-fearing. They're very religious. They do certain rituals, I guess, to keep the Lord of the Wood away. And our main character, Leah, didn't really believe in this legend until it happened to her. She's supposed to be looking after her brother, and he goes missing. So the whole town ship her out to the woods to go find her brother and save him, because usually the kids don't return. So this is pretty serious for this town. So she gets shipped out, kicked out of the town to go find her baby brother. And so a lot of this is set in the woods. It has a very folk heavy plot line because obviously it is set in the woods, and we have that ancient Lord of the Wood myth, that legend. It's very gothic. It is based off a fairy tale, I believe. I haven't like read that original story, so I'm not entirely sure how well it's connected to it, but I have heard people say that it does have influence from another story, so it's kind of like a retelling. But nevertheless, I think this is so whimsical. It's beautiful. It's so dark and tense, but it's so worth it. I read this in like one sitting, and I would love to read this for the first time, because that feeling of reading this book that first time was just so incredible and highly worth it. So yeah, it deals with a lot of complex themes, and I would say check your trigger warnings as well. There's a plot twist, so if you do check the trigger warnings, then you may be spoiled for that plot twist. But yeah, if you are sensitive to certain elements, then you might want to check that. But I would say if you're not, go into it blind, because it's incredible. Highly recommend. Next up, we have Christina Henry. Christina Henry writes stories that are centered around other fairy tales. I do know that, or other creepy stories. That's like her main focus. She is known for Alice. That's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, and then you have Lost Boy, which is based off Peter Pan, Mermaids, obviously based off of Little Mermaid, and so on. I've only read Alice from that series, but that wasn't my first book. The first book that I read, and also the first arc that I got, was Horseman. Now, this is the first ever bound proof physical arc that I received, so I had to keep it. And the Horseman is a retelling of the Legend of the Sleepy Hollow. Set in Sleepy Hollow. Everybody knows about the Horseman, but it's centered around the witchcraft side. And this one is kind of similar to My Throat and Open Grave, where he doesn't really believe in the legend of the Horseman, and they kind of go out and they recreate and reenact certain things from the past in this village, kind of mocking the Horseman legend, but it turns out that it might actually be real. I feel like Christina Henry's writing is an acquired taste. You really have to sit with her books and really delve into it. I enjoyed this one, don't get me wrong, but she is a hit or miss sort of author. This one was a 4-star read. I really enjoyed it. It's a creepy retelling. My favourite is actually Near the Bone. This book is a polar horror. So anytime I read a polar horror, they tend to be more of my favourite books. It's one of my favourite subgenres, if you couldn't tell. This is sort of like a creature featured domestic thriller with polar horror vibes. That's the best way to describe it. I really love this book because the dread has two meanings. So in here, we're following Maddie, and I think William. William is her husband, and they live remotely. They are isolated on this hill, this mountain, away from civilization. Her husband, William, isn't a nice man. He's very physical and doesn't treat her all that well. Then something happens. There's hikers on this hill who kind of awaken a monster. And then it turns into you need to survive the monster. But the real monster isn't just the creature that we see on the hill, but it is also her husband. And I really love this because it did have that dual monster. So Maddie gets really upset because she knows that the strangers on this mountain will upset William. William gets angry. He becomes the real monster. But then there is a creature that kind of, is in the picture too. I thought this was an incredible way to showcase violence against women and fighting for your life against a actual supernatural creature. And I thought it was kind of like a page turner in a way. This one read a lot quicker than the other books that I've read from her. And I think that's mainly one of the reasons why I thought this one would be my favorite. Next up, we have Shirley Jackson. And Shirley Jackson is an author who has written a lot of modern classics. And the first one that I've read from her is, of course, The Haunting of the Hill House. Now, I don't really recommend this book to a lot of people because it is very gothic and it's nothing like the TV show. It's obviously a haunted house. We're following that story, but a lot of it is centered around the people and less so about the house. And yeah, I did enjoy reading it. I love this. It's very gothic, so I really enjoyed that. It is very creepy and it's a difficult read because it is so dense. Like the writing is so dense in here, but highly worth it. But it's just not my favorite one. My favorite is actually We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I think this is one of her better books. This is centered around people who live in this house, and they're isolated from the rest of the town, but something happens, and yeah, it's so creepy. Again, it's about a house, well, a castle, I thought this one read a lot better than The Haunting of Hill House. I connected a lot more with this story. Um, that feeling of being weird and different, and how that's not really accepted in society. I feel like that perspective is shown a lot in We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And I think that's the main reason I thought this book was a lot better. So we have the King of Horror, Stephen King. So the first book I ever read from Stephen King was Carrie. I read this when I was like 13 years old, and I loved it then. I reread it as an adult. I realized that I didn't actually like it that much. I really don't like how it's written. So, yeah, Carrie, we all know the story. I know there's a lot more to it, but reading the book again, I just didn't really like it. And so, yeah, so it was the first book I ever read from Stephen King. My favorite is Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary hits in the heart. It is incredible. It's incredibly dark, and the real horror is the human emotion. The main theme of Pet Sematary is grief and what you would do to bring someone back from the dead if you had somewhere like a pet cemetery. It's heavily inspired by the monkey's paw, and the monkey's paw is essentially a talisman that allows you to bring people back from the dead, but at a consequence. And this Pet Cemetery has a similar vibe. It's heavily influenced, and I loved both of those stories. This one stood out so much. I read this when I was 13, 14, when I was in my Stephen King kick. And I reread it as an adult, and unlike Carrie, this one stuck. I love this. It's incredible. If you enjoy grief-centered stories, where the real horror is the human, then I think this one is a really good read. It does have supernatural elements in here, don't get me wrong. Stephen King does supernatural in practically everything, but I think this is Stephen King's scariest book. Next, we have Susan Hill. The first book I read from Susan Hill was The Woman in Black. My favourite is The Woman in Black. Susan Hill is again, similar to Shirley Jackson, a more modern classic, would you say? Yeah. This one is so chilling. It's centered around this house that you can only access at low tide. And we're following a lawyer who goes there to kind of deal with the woman who's just passed her estate. And the house isn't exactly free of energies. So this is your classic ghost story. It's so good. I cried reading this book. And yeah, if you want a good ghostly read that is really short, it's a classic, but it reads so easily, then that's The Woman in Black. Next, we have one of my favourite authors, Stephen Graham Jones. The first book I read from Stephen Graham Jones was The Only Good Indians. My favourite, The Only Good Indians. This is similar to The Nesting, where nature is getting its revenge on humans. That's The Only Good Indians. It's centered around a group of friends who kill an elk on protected land, and they are being haunted by the elk, and it's trying to off them because of what they did. This is an emotional book. The description, trigger for animal death, because wow, it is so grossly described in the first 30% of this book. I was so distraught. I had to put this book down, which at the time I thought was a negative for this book, but actually it altered my brain chemistry, and this book has stuck with me. It is the most intense horror I've ever read. And I've read a lot of really gross stuff, but somehow The Only Good Indians really stuck to me. I love his writing style, the descriptions, the way it puts you in the setting. I definitely would say this is a masterpiece, and one that every horror reader should at least try to pick up. I know Stephen Graham Jones's writing isn't for everybody. It's very, I don't really know what the right word would be to describe his writing, but it's either a hit or miss with a lot of people. I know that I talk about this book a lot, and the comments I get are either, oh my god, I really love his writing, or I'm struggling to get into it. I pick it up, but I put it down again. I pick it up, and I put it down again. So I think that if you at least try one of his books and you don't think that it's something you'd like, then fair enough. But at least try. And at least try The Only Good Indians, because this book changed me as a reader. Like, that's it. That's all I need to say. I love this so much. And finally, we have Grady Hendrix. So the first Grady Hendrix book I picked up was The Final Girl Support Group. If you're a lover of slashers, you have to read this book. This is like a warm hug to the slasher genre. We're following a group of final girls who join a final girl support group, and they discuss their life post trying to save their lives. This is action-packed. It's so incredible. One of them goes missing, and they're having to put themselves back in that mindset of survival. And it's another final girl shootout sort of thing. And it does scream back to the 80s, mainly because of our final girls that are in here. It is kind of funny. I know Grady Hendrix does the campy comedic horror so well. So again, another good entry point if you're new to horror. Grady Hendrix is somebody that you could probably get along with. So The Final Girl Support Group was a great read. My favourite book from Grady Hendrix is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So I actually tried this one time and DNF'd it, but I kept it on my shelf. And then I decided to pick it up more recently. I think I read this last year. And wow, I don't know why or what happened to me then, but I loved this. It was so good. So we're following some suburban mom who joins a book club with her friends, and they start to read true crime. And each chapter kind of centers around a new book, and I thought that was really interesting. So they're learning their new skills and reading about these crime stories, and they think that their new neighbor is a vampire. And so there's this whole debacle across the whole neighborhood, and our main character kind of gets set on the idea that they're all in danger, and so she makes it her mission to save the kids of the town. It's weird, but it also has a deeper meaning, and I think I really loved it because it was comedic, but it was also really dark. It has a lot of sensitive topics, but it was so addictive to read, and I didn't want to stop reading it. The second time I picked it up. Loved it, highly recommend it. One of my favorite books. And I'm going to leave it there. I think I've covered enough authors. If there's any authors you'd like to see me do this with, then drop them in the comments down below. Or if there's a different genre you want me to kind of delve into, just let me know. I can really make this a series if you like this kind of content. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more. And I guess I will catch you in the next one. Bye!